So it's August and Corona's still going on. As we've all settled into our new normal, with vaccine is coming news brought up once a week like it's winter on Game of Thrones, there are differing ideas of what needs to be done moving forward, and it's all very unclear and divisive. But I wanted to talk about something that affects pretty much everyone if you ever step outside, and that's masks. In the beginning, the news and experts all told us that masks sucked and didn't do anything, so we shouldn't buy them because hospital workers needed them, so I guess they worked just fine for them. And then a few weeks later, they were like, just kidding, masks are goated, please wear them at your convenience. And now they're required for most establishments you go to, and there's even talk of implementing a national mask mandate where masks must be worn at all times when you're outside your house. This is my mask etiquette. As we're approaching over 6 months of pandemic fever here in the US, if I go to a grocery store, I will wear a mask over my entire nose and mouth for as long as there are people in my immediate vicinity, and then once a certain distance has been cleared, I'm sliding that shit down to my chin. I don't care. That's not even a big deal. I enjoy breathing air that didn't just come out of me. I look forward to not having the worst breath imaginable at the end of the day, and I like the taste of open oxygen. When I have my mask on, my breathing is soft and labored like I'm under my bed hiding from a demon rapist. If you take a full breath and a full exhale with your face covered, you might as well have a paper bag over your head that already has vomit in it. It's gross and uncomfortable. And yeah, my comfort probably is worth a few grandparents' lives, except nobody's getting close enough to make me a carrier anyway. I'm not an issue, and I'll be damned if anyone tells me I am. If I go to a restaurant, I wear the mask as they come over to seat me. I become seated, I get asked what I want to drink, and when they leave to go get it, my mask goes back into my pocket. Some people might be like, I understand you can't wear it when you're eating, but why not at least keep it on until you get your food? Because it makes no difference. When food is being shoveled into your maskless mouth, you're not suddenly surrounded by an anti-corona force field. Nothing is changed circumstantially between waiting for food and eating it. The server will still come and ask how your food is. You're just gonna quickly scramble your mask back on your face mid-bite like, oh yeah, it's good! You will look like the world's dumbest idiot. Corona has turned our society into one that rewards paranoia. If you're not doing the most extreme form of prevention, people say you're actively contributing to the spread. Nobody's gonna sit there and tell me I need a mask to go jog around the neighborhood or play disc golf for the first time in the most open expanse of land available. I could be like, hey, I'm gonna go get lost in the wilderness for days, and people are like, don't forget your mask! Like I'll catch it from a pack of wolves, although if I did get mauled by wolves, they probably would log that as a corona death. State governments and hospitals be trying to get extra federal funding out here. If you've got a fever or chills when you get shot in the head, you're just one more victim of the pandemic. With a national mask mandate, if I got found in the woods barefaced after being lost for 3 weeks, the rescue team would hand me a warm blanket, 3 granola bars, and a hefty fine. I don't like designer masks. I don't think virus protection is something that needs cultural expression associated with it. If I see a designer mask, I'm like, oh, so you're ready to keep doing this forever then, huh? I saw this one chick at a grocery store who had this giant mask that covered her neck all the way up to her eyes, and the top of her head was covered too. You couldn't see any of her hair. I was like, damn, you're taking this pretty seriously, huh? And she was like, well, it's against my religion to take it off in public. I'm only allowed to show my husband. So yeah, there are entire religions born out of coronavirus now. That's crazy. I'll see designer masks where there's a graphic of a mouth on them, either like a shark mouth like you see on fighter jets sometimes, or just big fat disgusting lips like that Rolling Stones thing. Wearing a mask with a mouth on it would be like if I wore boxer shorts with a big, huge, impressive dick drawn on them that was often complimented by women who've seen it as being above average. But we're not supposed to be embracing this chapter of our lives, and tying your individuality to a mask makes it feel like you'll want to wear it even after the pandemic is over. I don't know about you, but I don't want masks to stick around as a trendy accessory beyond when they're needed. You know the companies that make them aren't just gonna go quietly. Mask culture might be here to stay, and that's an unpleasant thought. When it comes to preventing the spread, people might have the mindset of, it's better to do too much than not enough, but it probably isn't. They're both bad. It's too much for a reason. Too much means crippling the economy, shutting down businesses and putting people out of work, locking them in quarantine where their quality of life and relationships deteriorate from the strain of either constant attention with the people they're quarantined with or no attention to the people outside of that, removing their extracurricular activities, things that gave them structure, providing ideal conditions for people to degenerate into alcoholism and drug abuse, increased depression, isolation, anxiety, you name it. Never pretend for a second that too much lockdown is a good thing, or that the consequences of overdoing it are negligible, or that there's even no such thing as overdoing it. That's probably just as dangerous as not taking it seriously enough. You'll just see the death counts that would have been attributed to corona under a lackadaisical approach balanced out by the increased suicides, domestic abuse, homelessness, and overdoses created by the extreme approach. It's basically a question of which groups you want to have die, and so a middle-of-the-road policy seems like the best way to avoid extremes on either side, and hopefully keep all those numbers as low as possible. If it were up to me, I'd say reopen every business that wants to, have people maintain social distancing from strangers in public places, wear masks in crowded areas, and stop tattletaling on people having private group get-togethers. I saw a blurb on Twitter from the UK where Manchester or somewhere police tweeted that they broke up a child's birthday party that was happening in the backyard of someone's house where like 3 families were gathered, and they issued them a citation or a ticket or something. Like, you fuck right off with that nonsense, and they proudly reported that on Twitter. I know liberty is more of an American thing than a British thing, but if I had a child and cops tried to break up his birthday party, they would be arresting me for assault of a police officer. You absolutely never want the government telling you what you can and can't do in your own goddamn home when you're not hurting anyone. And it's like, if people want to do some mildly at-risk behavior, you gotta let them. I've seen house parties getting shut down for gathering violations. I think the official number for my state is you can't have more than 10 people in one place for the same reason. Unless it's a BLM protest, then you can have thousands and everyone's immune. Corona is like the biblical Egyptian plague. In that story, if you painted over your door with lamb's blood as a sign of belief in God, the plague would pass you over. Nowadays, if you march in the streets as a sign of your belief in the Black Lives Matter organization, Corona's like, you cool fam, I'm gonna go infect some Nazis. If people want to have a house party, let them. If people want to go to a house party, let them. It's their choice. Full disclosure, I actually caught Corona at a house party once because someone tossed me a beer. I prefer Bud Light, but that's all they had. This joke is gross because I actually hate beer. There's a poll circulating that everyone's freaking out about, where it said that 57% of Republicans found the current level of COVID deaths acceptable, whereas only 10% of Democrats did. Imagine finding 189,000 deaths in the US so far acceptable. That's so many. Like, what is that in percentage to the overall American population? Let's see. Do some division, find the decimal, multiply by 100, and we've got 0.054%. Oh. Yeah, that seems super acceptable. As far as deadly global pandemics go, that seems unreasonably acceptable. I'm old enough to remember when the Black Plague killed 60% of Europe's entire population. I'm immortal, I've been around a while. That was 50 million people, and yeah, they didn't have shit for medical care in the 1300s, but the Spanish flu killed 100 million people in the 1920s, the Asian flu killed 1 million in the 1950s, AIDS has killed 35 million people since the 80s and is still going on. Corona hasn't even reached the global numbers of the swine flu from 2009 and 10, and that flu was much deadlier to children and young adults as opposed to the elderly. Of course, it's also worth noting that America only accounted for like 12,000 of the swine flu deaths globally, and I have literally no idea why. I'm going to talk more about swine flu, but first let's bring up a relevant point about stats. People are statistics. People are statistics in addition to the other things that they are, like uncles and brothers and community leaders or whatever. There is a moralistic argument that downplays the importance of stats in relation to the micro scale that most people think about situations like this. And yeah, most people are like, I only care about this virus, how it affects me and my family. I will do what it takes to protect them. They will panic at the thought of 189,000 deaths because it sounds like a lot, because it is, on its own merit, just not when you compare it to your overall population maintaining its pandemic classification. But they don't care about potentiality, they care about what if my mom gets corona. And they have a tendency to ignore statistics and become possibly irrational and therefore more easily suggestible to more extreme versions of insulation that are perhaps unnecessary. This is important when it comes to government response because they will be taking the public's panic level into account when enacting policies, and if everyone's freaking out way more than they should be, we're going to get some mandates and guidelines that overcompensate and cause undue problems. The stats are relevant. If you know someone who has died died of corona. First of all, you probably know 3 more people who had it and got over it, because it's really not a death sentence to anyone who doesn't have underlying health problems. But you probably have a personal vested interest in making sure everyone takes this virus seriously. But I'd urge you against going full militant about it, and understand that this affects the country on a bigger scale than any individually personal case. But back to swine flu. I was reading about it on Wikipedia, and when swine flu was going on, not only did they never shut down businesses, they didn't even tell people to wear masks outside of the healthcare field, which is similar to how they started off advising this pandemic. And even though the swine flu was disproportionately deadly to children and young adults, they closed less than 1% of schools, and they weren't closed for more than 2 weeks because the CDC was like, yeah, actually that doesn't really do much, and you should just have people showing symptoms stay home. Now that might be because the incubation period of swine flu before you show any symptoms was only 3 to 4 days versus the 2 to 14 we've got with corona, but even 4 days would be more than enough to transmit some shit unknowingly. But it didn't turn out to be a problem. They also didn't restrict travel. You weren't seeing the 17-passenger commercial flights you're seeing today where everyone has the whole row to themselves. Honestly, keep those guidelines in place. I want to sit in the middle and claim both armrests like a fucking boss. So I don't get it. The numbers aren't making sense to me, in America specifically, because in America, swine flu infected way more people than corona, while we had way less restrictions, but killed a tiny fraction of the deaths that corona has caused, despite being less widely spread with more restrictions. Swine flu as a disease wasn't any less deadly. In fact, it killed younger people better, and that's your main population group. But America just kind of avoided those numbers with no explanation, whereas corona is less deadly but has killed more people in America despite being less widespread. How the fuck does that make any sense? And don't tell me it's an administration thing, because that would only explain higher infection rates, not higher death rates. If anything, our hospitals are better than they were 10 years ago. The only remaining factor left I can think of would be the possibility that the medical experts royally messed up their treatment recommendations. I know corona has been 100 times more politicized than swine flu ever was, and there's still a huge debate on the effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine, or whatever, however you say that shit, because the FDA recently said it was ineffective despite it working for some people, and then they withdrew it from treatment consideration or something, and the World Health Organization, who declares pandemics and tells everyone how to handle them, even when the swine flu was going on, they had an internal investigation that found their interests were influenced by drug and pharmacy lobbyists, and they've been currently downplaying the Chinese government's role in trying to cover up the fact that they were the originator of corona. So it's my belief that the World Health Organization is mildly, if not fully, corrupt anyway. So to summarize, we're being advised on how to handle a pandemic by organizations with corporate ties to pharmacy lords and the Chinese government, allegedly. We're shutting down schools and businesses despite our successful track record of not doing that for previous pandemics. Of course, this is all occurring while we're in the midst of a baby societal revolution in the streets, and with maybe the most important election of my lifetime happening in November just a couple months away, I think we might be fucked either way, dude. I'm not stepping outside my house for weeks if Trump wins again. If you think the riots and looting is bad now, wait till you see what happens when those people lose hope. Pandemonium! The first time Trump was elected, they mostly just cried in each other's arms, but they're about to get mad if it happens again. Especially after he got impeached the first time, which didn't do shit. Remember when that was a big deal for decidedly no reason because nothing happened, and now he's running for re-election, and if he wins, they'll probably impeach him again just to put on a show to make their base think they're doing something? I look forward to the next installation of Trump impeachment performance art. And then if Biden wins, I guess we're going down this topic now, I actually wouldn't mind seeing the left end of the spectrum in a good mood for once. Like, here are the pros of a Biden presidency, most of which have nothing to do with Joe Biden himself because he's just a mannequin with a D for Democrat on his forehead. Joe Biden is a pale, wrinkly golem that was brought to life by a magic spell that's about to run out. In about 2 years, he'll be a pile of clay in the president's chair, and Kamala Harris is going to come in with a dustpan and empty him into the garbage before she becomes known as the second African-American president, even though she's Jamaican and Indian. But so the pros are, number one, Trump derangement syndrome disappears. When he's gone, it's gone. The people it affects will still have severe underlying mental issues, but since the object of their insane, triggered hatred will be out of power, it might just go dormant for a few years, unless it flares up again every time he tweets something, and you know he's going to be doing a lot of tweeting with all that extra free time. Number 2 pro of a Biden presidency: late-night talk shows and liberal comedians might become watchable again since they'll no longer be running exclusively Trump material, although I have a sneaking suspicion the next 4 years will just be them reminiscing about the last 4 and accomplishing the same goal. You're gonna hear so many bits start with, "Remember when Donald Trump was the president of the United States?" Like, nah bro, I'm 2 years old, I wasn't there. What was it like? Did a bunch of stuff happen that would have happened anyway with a few positive and negative exceptions? That's crazy. Please go into detail for 15 minutes of your special and get rated 5 stars on Netflix. Number 3 pro of a Biden presidency is that politics will probably become boring again, and less worth talking about, unless all the woke groups succeed in hammering Biden over the head with their ideas and use his dazed and concussed cranium as a vehicle to push their agendas through, because he's changed his tune on plenty of issues since the activists started getting louder. Remember that he used to be firmly against gay marriage, like Obama was, and he's recently taken much more progressive stances on abortion and the general systemic oppression topic. The only things he might not go for are universal healthcare, which he's waffled on. I'm not sure if he's ever discussed universal basic income, #YangGang, but I doubt he'd do it, and I don't think he's super radical on climate change either, except to say that we need to do something. You never really know what people are going to do and not do until they do or don't do it. So since we did Biden pros, even though they weren't even kind of substantial, I'll do a few Trump pros that will probably also not be substantial. Trump re-election pro number 1, which might be a con, depending on how it turns out, is that his re-election will break certain people, and in doing so, it might just reveal them beyond any reasonable excuse or justification to be indefensibly batshit crazy group members guided by an ideology whose underlying thought process and motivations might be clearly revealed as the selfish, authoritarian, power-hungry, obfuscating, and naive brain virus that many people have yet to fully recognize. Basically, it might make the radicals even more radical, and more obviously radical at that, and the more radical that radicals get, the more they pick off their own kind and self-contain until the circle gets smaller and smaller as their criteria for moral acceptability becomes even more impossible to reach. The way that might be a con, though, is if the fallout results in even more radicalization of people instead, and the numbers swell up with unsuspecting people who only know 10% of what they're fighting for but are looking for a purpose, while the organizers will be content to use them as expendable foot soldiers in their moral crusade. Actually, something that me and the woke brigade have in common is that we both care about ideas more than people. The difference is that my ideas don't require an unimaginably costly multinational revolution, and I'm enlisting 0 people to participate in them. The only thing I'd ever ask of you, any of you watching this, or anyone in general, is to just go out there and be your best fucking self as an individual. That's as macro as my ideas get. They don't go beyond one single person at a time. You, as a solitary human being, should strive to accomplish your maximum potential even despite any obstacles that come your way, because everyone's obstacles might be different, but everyone's got obstacles, and you probably don't know the half of the obstacles that the people you envy the most could be facing beyond your perception. So individualism is king to me, which to woke people makes me a white supremacist, and that's not an exaggeration. Individualism is a core tenet of what they see as whiteness, and thus it upholds white supremacy. If you consider yourself woke and that sounds insane to you, I encourage you to read more of your own literature. I've seen the quotes, and I've seen reputable institutions prop them up. Number 2 pro of another Trump presidency, probably more good policy, dude. From what I know, I think the good policies have been super good. I read a tweet thread that listed a bunch of them with sources. If I just rattle off a few, we've got animal cruelty as a federal felony now. Trump signed that in November 2019. So tougher consequences for animal abusers, that's a huge win for literally everyone except animal abusers. If you're on the left and you love animals and you can't give him props for that one, you got a real mental block. For all you stoners out there, Trump signed a bill in December of 2018 that made CBD and hemp legal, so that's great if you've got some medicinal needs or are just a big fan of a rope. In 2018, he signed an act that gave law enforcement and victims new tools to fight against sex trafficking, which has more than doubled convictions of human traffickers and increased the number of those charged by 75%. He's also signed a law ending gag orders on pharmacists that prevented them from sharing information that would save people money with their prescriptions and whatnot. For all you breastfeeding mother lovers out there, he signed a law that required airports to provide spaces for breastfeeding, hopefully with some two-way mirrors involved. Just kidding, that's gross. If you're an environmentalist against Trump, you might want to think about the fact that he signed the Save Our Seas Act, which funds $10 million a year to cleaning trash out of oceans, as well as a wilderness protection and conservation bill that designates over 375,000 acres as protected land. This year, he signed an executive order that forces all healthcare providers to disclose the cost of their services up front so people can do comparisons. He signed the Right to Try bill, which makes terminally ill patients able to try experimental shit not approved by the FDA. The thread says he's ending surprise billing, so maybe it hasn't happened yet, but that will make hospitals disclose their standard costs beforehand so you're not bamboozled by it after the fact, as well as the discounts they're willing to accept. He's allowed drug imports from Canada, which makes some prescription prices go down. It says he's going to provide an HIV prevention drug for free to 200,000 uninsured patients per year for 11 years. One of the biggest things he did for Black Americans specifically is sign the First Step Act, which is a criminal justice bill that makes the system fairer and helps former inmates successfully re-enter society, and 90% of the people benefiting from that system are Black, as it addresses inequities and retroactively reduces sentences. He's increased the funding of historically Black colleges and universities by 14%, and he signed legislation that forgave debt of some of those places incurred from Hurricane Katrina. For those of you who like diversity numbers, Trump appointed 5 openly gay ambassadors, appointed an openly gay director of national intelligence, which would make him the first gay member of a president's cabinet in history. Trump and this new director, Richard Grenell, are now leading a global initiative to decriminalize homosexuality across the globe. Okay, I guess this one was kind of substantial. I tried to only list stuff that was like clearly good for everyone good, instead of just good for conservatives, but dude, I only knew like one of those things prior to reading it, and I'm not even trying to hide from that information. If Biden wins the presidency and does some substantial shit that gets chronicled into a long Twitter thread before the next election, I'll be sure to read that one too. But that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at Sunburned Albino, and I will see you guys next time.